Aviticus was sleeping peacefully when all of a sudden a feeling of emptiness overwhelmed him, forcing him awake. He could no longer feel the presence of his hive, as if his connection to the colony had been severed. In all of his years, he had never felt this way before. Had his queen severed his connection on purpose? Moving slowly, Aviticus opened the door to his house to get some fresh air. He needed to know if he was the only one who felt this way. Aviticus walked to Crazy Lizard's house, hoping that he would have some answers. Crazy Lizard was staring at the ceiling when Aviticus entered his room. His eyes were black and his body thrashing from side to side. "Crazy, wake up!" Aviticus shouted, shaking him awake. Crazy took his time getting up, muttering words in a fast sequence that Aviticus couldn't understand. "Snap out of it, man! What are you saying?" Aviticus smacked Crazy across the face. The hit seemed to snap him out of his trance. "I feel empty," Aviticus, Crazy described. "So you feel it too?" Aviticus questioned. Crazy nodded. "I had another vision, but I couldn't make out any of the details." "We need to figure out what's going on," Aviticus commanded. "First, let's check with Darth and see if he feels the same way." Aviticus and Crazy left the house and headed to find Darth. Darth could often be found on the ramparts overlooking moonshine as daybreak began to set in. Aviticus noticed that he wasn't much of a sleeper. When Aviticus and Crazy questioned Darth about his feelings, he nodded. "I was standing up here when I felt it," Darth explained, "the emptiness inside." "So all three of us are feeling the same," Crazy pondered. "We should go to the Queen and see why she severed our ties to the hive," Aviticus urged. "You and Crazy go," Darth cautioned. "Someone on the council should stay behind. There's no telling what the clan will do without someone to keep things in order." Aviticus nodded his head in agreement. "You're right. Okay. Crazy and I will see if we can get to the bottom of this. You stay here and keep an eye on things while we're gone." Darth waved his goodbye. "Be careful." Aviticus and Crazy took their leave and headed away from the gates of moonshine. Looking back, they could see Darth waving to them from atop of the ramparts. It would be a few days before Aviticus and Crazy reached their queen's village. Aviticus hoped the clan behaved themselves while he was away. Knowing that Darth was in charge to keep the clan in line allowed the worry to depart his mind. Celine and her unit stood chatting by the fire as they waited for the little bird to arrive with their payment for taking Yeflin out. Celine still hadn't figured out how he knew who she or her unit was. It's not like the Shek advertised their assassins to the world. Someone had given him the information. Interesting, Celine pondered. Celine remembered back to her initial contact with the man. Her unit was out on assignment in the Great Desert, having drinks at a bar in Heng when he approached her. "I have need of someone with your talents," the man had said. If Celine didn't have a few drinks under her belt, she probably wouldn't have heard the man out. "In 3 moons' time, I'll need this person eliminated," the man described. "She takes walks along this route in the early morning." "My unit and I are expensive," Celine remembered saying. The man had pointed to a map he placed on the table. "Be at this location after the deed is done and you'll have more money than you can count." Without saying another word, the man had vanished. Celine's thoughts faded and brought her back to the present. A figure emerged in the darkness walking towards the camp. It was Darth. "Well, if it isn't our little bird," Celine said. "Took you long enough. I don't like to be kept waiting." Darth ignored her. "Is it done? Is Yeflin dead?" Celine chuckled. "She's out of the picture, just like you asked. Now pay up, little man." Darth smiled, tossing Celine a large bag of cats. Celine and her unit were satisfied with the payment. "I may have need of your services again in the future," Darth declared. Celine smiled. "If the price is right." Darth said his farewell and began to walk back into the darkness. Apple and her companions crawled to the top of a hill overlooking Blister Hill, the capital of the Holy Nation. Their destination was Rebirth, which lay beyond the city high up in the mountains. It was a place where the paladins took slaves to work in the mines until they couldn't work anymore. Apple eyed the city and the surrounding area. "We're going to need some disguises." Magnus pointed towards the valley in the east. "We'll find some patrols near their farmland. We better wait until nightfall, otherwise we'll be seen a mile away." Magnus hid behind a tree while Blessed moved into position. The companions had been stalking a Holy Nation patrol for the better part of an hour, waiting for the right moment to strike. Looks like the bandits have the same idea as us, Apple whispered, watching the bandits attack the squad of paladins. Apple waved for her companions to sneak in. Now's our chance, while they're distracted. The companions slowly crept their way towards the paladins as they dealt with the last remaining bandits. Attack! Apple yelled, converting into a full sprint to engage the paladins. The companions were right behind her, cutting the paladins down without breaking a sweat. The battle was over before it even began. The wounded paladins were no match for their surprise attack. Apple motioned with her hands. Grab their gear and let's get out of here before we encounter another patrol. The sun slowly began to rise the next morning. Apple, Lady Sharky, and Magnus were dressed in their paladins' uniforms. Let's go over the plan one more time, Apple continued. Blessed and Amistine will head to the north entrance where I was able to escape previously when I was a prisoner. Blessed and Amistine nodded their heads, motioning Apple to continue. Meanwhile, Lady Sharky, Magnus, and I will sneak into the capital. Magnus will plant and ignite the fire rum, causing a distraction, which will hopefully allow us to sneak through the secondary and tertiary gates. We will then approach Rebirth from the southeast, bypassing Rebirth's western gate where the reinforcements are. At sundown, we attack and push our way to the center where we can free the slaves. If we can attack from both locations at the same time, we should be able to swoop in, free the slaves, and get out before the reinforcements arrive from the barracks at the western gate. There's a lot of room for things to go wrong, Magnus cautioned. We might not even make it through the front gates. Well, that's discouraging, Lady Sharky confessed. Amistine put her hand on her brother's arm, indicating to him that it was time to go. Good luck, everyone, Amistine said, waving goodbye. Blessed looked back over his shoulder as he walked away with his sister. If we make it out of this, the first round is on me. Lady Sharky joked. If you die, your corpse better still buy me a drink. Just outside of the gates to Blister Hill, Magnus motioned to his friends to listen to him. Remember, just follow my lead and try not to bring attention to yourself. Lady Sharky and Apple nodded. The guards at the front gate were still waking up and didn't pay much attention to the trio dressed in their uniforms. Well, that was easy, Lady Sharky boasted. Magnus assured Lady Sharky, that was the easy part. Trust me. The group stopped a little distance away from the main gate where they had a good vantage point. The guards were questioning anyone going through the secondary gate. That was the gate they needed to get through. The Holy Lord Phoenix himself is beyond those gates, Apple blurted out. Magnus hushed her. Quiet! We need to stay on task. It won't be long before we're discovered. The paladins have sharp eyes. Apple nodded. So where are we going to plant the fire rum to cause a distraction? Apple questioned. Magnus smiled. The bakery on the west side of the city. On the top level, there's a boiler tank where I can ignite the fire rum. Once the boiler tank explodes, you two should be able to make a run for it. I'll try to catch up. Without another word, Magnus turned and headed back the way they came. Lady Sharky cursed. It's up to him now. Amistine and Bless ran like the wind. They had until sundown to reach the northern gate to be ready for the attack. We're not going to make it, Bless yelled, trailing behind his sister. Amistine kept running. We have to! They are depending on us. Time was running out. Magnus straightened out his chest as he walked, trying to remember how to blend in with his paladin counterparts. It was starting to come back to him. The bakery would be busy this time of day. Bread was a part of a paladin's balanced diet. Magnus would have to be quick before anyone recognized him. 2 customers were at the counter making an order, distracting the shopkeep just long enough for Magnus to walk upstairs. Magnus pulled 4 bottles of fire rum out of his uniform and placed them down beside the boiler tank. This should do nicely, Magnus whispered to himself. Magnus pulled out his blade and fire striker to ignite the cloth hanging from one of the bottles of fire rum. Here we go. After the cloth was lit, Magnus began to run. He had to get away before it exploded. Apple and Lady Sharky waited with anticipation, ready to make a run for the gates. The fire rum ignited the boiler tank, causing an explosion that echoed throughout the city. The guards at the gate left their posts, running towards the explosion. Apple and Lady Sharky ran towards the gate while the coast was clear. They had made it. While the guards were busy putting out the fire, Magnus slipped down a side street and made his way towards the secondary gate. 3 paladins made their way towards him. Magnus gulped. He recognized one of them. "You there, halt!" the large paladin in the middle yelled. Magnus placed his hand on his sword, ready for action. "I wasn't sure at first, but it really is you, isn't it, Magnus?" the paladin confirmed. Magnus could see Apple and Lady Sharky behind the gates looking at him. "Good, at least they made it," Magnus whispered under his breath. Turning his attention back to the paladin, Magnus shrugged his shoulders. "Good to see you again, Artemis." Artemis questioned Magnus. "I suppose you are to blame for this destruction to our holy city," Artemis boomed. "There is no mercy for those who forsake Okran." Motioning to his companions, Artemis began to attack. "Take him!" A flurry of blows came at Magnus fast, making him stumble backwards. Raising his sword, Magnus tried to block the incoming attacks, but there was too many of them. Magnus yelled as he was sliced across the chest and back. The battle continued. Apple and Lady Sharky stood watching as Magnus fought back against his attackers. "We have to help him," Apple gasped, readying her sword. "There's nothing we can do for him," Lady Sharky replied. "If we try to save him, we'll be captured too. That's not what he would have wanted. He would want us to continue the mission." Apple nodded, composing herself. "I'm sorry, Magnus." The 2 companions turned their backs and headed towards the tertiary gate, and to finish the mission they had started. Blood poured down Magnus's arm. He could barely hold his sword to deflect the incoming blows. A lucky blow from one of the paladins sent Magnus into the dirt, unconscious. Artemis looked down upon Magnus. "We're going to lock you up and throw away the key. Take him!" Apple and Lady Sharky stood on a hill overlooking Rebirth. "We made it!" Apple exclaimed. "Thank you, Magnus." Lady Sharky shifted in her paladin's armor. "Don't celebrate yet, Apple. We still need to go through an army of paladins. Let's just hope Blessed and Amistine make it in time." Apple nodded. "Let's find somewhere to hide closer to the gate and wait until sundown." It was just a few hours to sundown, and Bardakai thought it was a great time to have a few drinks before he continued his journey to World's End tomorrow. Bardakai was a treasure hunter, and he had a line on a nice relic said to be lost somewhere far in the northwest. Truth be told, the cannibals probably have it, Bardakai sighed. He had been chatting with a group of mercenaries who weren't too fond of him jumping in on their conversation about the Bugmaster. "That's nice. Speaking of relics, have you heard of the Bugmaster?" the mercenary continued. "He resides far to the southwest. They say he can summon spiders to do his bidding," the mercenary exclaimed. "I'll bet he has plenty of relics for a treasure hunter like you," another mercenary said. Bardakai waved his hand. "True, but I would rather much live to tell the tale. What good is a relic if you can't live long enough to sell it?" The mercenary captain who sat in the corner of the table spoke up. "Give me 20 good men and I'll take him down." "If that's true, then why haven't you done it yet?" Bardakai replied. "Personally, I think you're scared." One mercenary choked on his chew stick as the others quieted down. The mercenary captain looked long and hard at Bardakai. "Say that again to my face." Bardakai was not one to back down from a challenge. He walked over to where the man was sitting. "I think you're scared." The mercenary captain punched Bardakai in the stomach, causing him to stumble. The rest of the mercenaries got up to join the fight. Bardakai was outnumbered, but he didn't care about the other mercenaries. He had his eyes set on this one particular man and kept slicing at him with every opportunity. With a lucky strike, Bardakai knocked out the mercenary captain, sending him to the floor. The mercenaries shoved Bardakai into a wall, allowing them to cut him across his arms and legs. With one final strike, the mercenary feigned his attack to slice across Bardakai's chest, knocking him down. He was out cold. Most of the bar patrons exited the bar as the paladins came to see what the ruckus was all about. "Well, what do we have here? 2 troublemakers," the paladin said. "Rebirth will teach you some manners." The 2 paladins picked up Bardakai and the mercenary captain and left the bar. Apple and Lady Sharky had changed back into their own gear and spent the last few hours hiding behind the trees outside of the southeast gate. A paladin walked past carrying a man. The 2 companions snuck over to the ridge to get a better look at where the paladin was taking him. "Looks like another resident of Rebirth," Lady Sharky said. Apple nodded. We'll free him with the others. It may just be his lucky day. Amistine and Blessed were panting hard. We made it, Blessed huffed. Amistine nodded and pointed behind him. Look, the sun is going down. Are you ready, brother? Blessed laughed. As ready as I'll ever be. Apple and Lady Sharky had moved back towards the ridge after the paladin came close to seeing them. It's almost sundown, Lady Sharky confirmed. Are you ready, Apple? Apple readied her sword. I've been waiting a long time for this. Let's go. Amistine and Bless charged over the hill yelling their battle cries as they engaged a lone paladin standing watch. With a rapid succession of strikes between brother and sister, the paladin was brought down. They've blocked the pass, sis, Bless gasped. Amistine fretted. This is not good, brother. That paladin was probably an engineer checking to make sure this side was secure. It's secure all right, Blessed exclaimed. There's no way through. Amistine and Blessed looked over Rebirth towards the southeast. Apple and Lady Sharky will be attacking soon, Amistine sighed. If we aren't there to help them, they will surely be captured. Amistine motioned to her brother. Come on, we have no time to lose. Pray we're not too late. Blessed followed his sister back the way they came, running at full sprint. Their only hope was to go through the western gate and take out the garrison of troops before they cut off Apple and Lady Sharky's retreat. Apple and Lady Sharky roared as they charged the Rebirth gate. For blood and glory! Lady Sharky screamed. For the oppressed! Apple shouted. And for Magnus! The paladins were caught off guard, allowing the two former Flotsam ninjas to get the upper hand. Lady Sharky fought at the bottom of the steps while Apple confronted the two paladins at the top of the gate. More paladins joined the battle. They were coming from the tower close by. Keep coming, you filth, Lady Sharky yelled. My sword is hungry! Apple was surrounded, 5-1, but the fury inside of her guided her strikes. Paladins began to fall from both Apple and Lady Sharky's blades. The ground's thirst for blood was fulfilled as corpses lay scattered across the gate. Apple was breathing heavy. We did it! I've got a few cuts, but nothing serious. How about you? Lady Sharky was holding her chest. They got me pretty good, but I'll live. Apple nodded. Ready for phase 2? Lady Sharky raised her sword. After you. Amistine and Bless charged towards the western gate. I hope we're not too late, Amistine shouted to her brother. The paladins noticed the two incoming attackers and shouted their cries of an attack. Amistine and her brother worked as a team, protecting each other's backs as they cut down the paladins that engaged them from the main gate. Bless killed a paladin and moved in to help Amistine with the last guard. A wide swing struck Bless in the chest, sending him backwards, reeling in pain. You bastard! Amistine screamed, fatally slicing the paladin across the chest. Amistine put her hand on her brother's shoulder. Are you alright? Don't worry, sis. It's just a scratch, Bless smiled. Apple and Lady Sharky made their way to the center of Rebirth where the slaves were being held. Most of the slaves were tied to posts surrounding the massive statue in the center, but the troublemakers were put into cages. Please help us, the slave cried. We're here to rescue you. We'll have you out of there in no time, Apple exclaimed. Apple and Lady Sharky picked the locks to the prisoners' shackles and untied them from the pole. The slaves could barely stand, but those that could would help them fight the rest of the paladins. Looks like we've got more company, Lady Sharky yelled. Where's Amistine and Blessed at? Shouldn't they be here by now? Apple confessed. They must have run into trouble. There's no time to worry about them now. Amistine and Blessed looked down towards the center of Rebirth where they heard the paladins screaming at the escaped prisoners. Don't let them escape, the paladin screamed. Amistine looked at her brother. Apple and Lady Sharky are engaging the paladins in the center. Come on, we need to get down there. Apple was surrounded by paladins fighting to protect the slaves she had just freed. After cutting down the two paladins that she was fighting, Apple moved in to back up Lady Sharky, who was outnumbered. Good riddance, Lady Sharky said, cutting the last paladin down. Amistine and her brother ran towards the center, huffing and puffing from all of the running they had been doing the entire day. Lady Sharky waved to the brother and sister. It's about time. Sorry we're late, Amistine said, looking around. Where's Magnus? Lady Sharky moved her head back and forth. Captured. Amistine cursed. We need to free the rest of the slaves and get these people out of here. Then we can figure out what to do about Magnus, Apple commanded. Let's be quick. Bardokai noticed the fighting going on but couldn't do anything about it. He had been stuck in this cage since he arrived at Rebirth. If only he could get the woman's attention, she might free him too. Hey, over here, Bardokai shouted. Can you get me out of here, please? Apple turned towards Bardakai's cage and walked over to him. I'll have you out of there in no time, Apple said, picking the lock to the cage. Thank you so much. I will be forever in your debt, Bardokai claimed. A clicking noise indicated that the lock was picked. That should do it, Apple smiled. Free air at last, Bardokai breathed. You better get out of here before more paladins come, Apple said. Bardokai shook his head. You freed me from this prison that I was surely going to rot in the rest of my life. From now on, I go where you go until my life debt to you is repaid. A group of paladins charged towards the group. The slaves picked up the weapons off the ground and began to fight back. Fight! Everyone fight for your freedom! Apple shouted. The companions rushed to the aid of the freed prisoners. Bardokai grabbed a sword off the ground and joined the fray. He was weak from a lack of food, but still managed to swing a sword fairly well. In the distance, Bardokai noticed a wounded paladin trying to crawl away. He was the paladin who dragged him out of the bar and brought him to this hellish place. Bardokai took his revenge, slicing at the paladin again and again until he took the man's leg clean off. Consider us even, paladin, Bardokai whispered to the legless and unconscious man. The companions were able to free the rest of the prisoners without any further skirmish from the paladins. Apple addressed the group. Today we have dealt a serious blow to the Holy Nation and their operations. You are prisoners no more. You are now free to go where you please and free to take back what the paladins took from you. Cheering from the freed prisoners echoed throughout the valley. The companions limped their way back up the hill towards the southeastern gate, leading the escaped prisoners out of Rebirth. This place was hell on earth, and they had just entered it and escaped with their lives. Apple and her companions were the last to escape the Valley of Rebirth, covering the escape of the prisoners. A paladin gave chase, but his armor was too heavy to catch them. You can't run forever! We'll find you! The paladin shouted, returning to his post. Apple and her companions made it out of the valley and stopped to discuss their next move. They were tired from fighting all night and needed a place to rest. We made it! Bless cheered. Amistine was breathing heavy. I don't know about you guys, but I'm exhausted. Apple nodded. We're going to need to find a place to lay low for a while. We shouldn't return to Moonshine until the heat dies down. They're going to be looking for us. Lady Sharky agreed. It's only a matter of time before they put bounties on our heads. Every bounty hunter in the land is going to be looking for us. There's an old Flotsam safe house to the north that we can hide out in. A group of figures emerged from the top of the hill. I've been looking for you for a long time, Lady Sharky, the man in charge said. Lady Sharky grimaced when she recognized the voice. Hello, Mance. Apple whispered to Lady Sharky. Who are they? Lady Sharky kept her eyes forward. He's the leader of the Ravenclaw Company, a group of mercenaries I used to run with. Mance seemed agitated. That's all you have to say? How about, how's the leg, Mance? How was prison, Mance? I had plenty of years to think about all the ways I'm going to torture you. Lady Sharky looked back towards the group. I kinda double-crossed him on our last job. Mance raised his hand for his men to move forward. You're going to tell me where you hid it. Get her! I hate to say this, but we're in no condition to fight, Amistine advised. I can barely lift my polearm. Apple nodded. Amistine's right. We don't stand a chance against them in our current condition. Lady Sharky readied her sword. That's why you're all going to run. I'll buy you some time. Now go! Lady Sharky charged towards Mance and his men as they closed in around her. Apple and her companions ran without the chance to say goodbye. Attacks came from all directions as Lady Sharky tried to deflect the incoming blows. Her left arm was badly wounded, forcing her to attack with a one-handed grip. Prison has made you weak, Mance! Lady Sharky laughed, spitting out blood. A strike from behind knocked Lady Sharky down. Don't let her die, Mance yelled to his men. I need her alive. Mance's men patched up Lady Sharky's wounds. What about her friends? Mance's second-in-command questioned. Forget about them, Mance smiled. We have who we need. Mance motioned with his hands to pick up Lady Sharky. Let's go. The mercenary company began to walk back to their hideout with Lady Sharky in tow. He was right. She was exactly where he said she'd be. Mance's laughter echoed throughout the mountains. Darth headed towards the front gate of Moonshine and began to open it. A blue-haired Scorchlander stood before him with his men. It was Captain Diomedes and his first mate Slash and crew. Captain Diomedes, I've been expecting you, Darth addressed the captain. I take it you completed your task? Captain Diomedes acknowledged Darth. The deed is done. Darth smiled. Your reputation precedes you. Welcome to Moonshine. Jaeger was headed back to his home in the far south. He had made a great deal of money selling his wares to the paladins in the north, but he had overstayed his welcome. A few paladins insulted him and made fun of his dark skin, goading him to do something rash. Jaeger didn't care what color skin someone had or where they came from. He was a trader selling his goods to whoever would buy them. Luckily, the paladins left in a hurry when an explosion went off not far from where the market was. The whole town was in panic trying to figure out what was going on. Jaeger didn't know who or what caused the explosion, but decided it was best to get out of the city before it was locked down. The burning forest was tricky to navigate. Jaeger found himself on a new path that he hadn't traveled before. This road doesn't look familiar, Jaeger muttered. Don't tell me I'm lost. As the path turned into a steep incline, Jaeger noticed a corpse lying in the road. A battle must have taken place here, Jaeger sighed, inspecting the corpse. A woman warrior, disgraced by her people from the looks of it. Jaeger eyed Yeflin's missing horns. Wounds across Yeflin's body indicated that she had been stabbed and sliced by multiple weapons and opponents. But why is she out here alone? Jaeger questioned himself. Ah, now I see. It was a trap. Someone really wanted you dead, Jaeger guessed. Jaeger began moving his hands, pointing his palms out towards the corpse. Now you have me curious, warrior. A blue wave of energy shot out from his hands, weaving its way into Yeflin's body. That's it, Jaeger informed. Let my magic flow through you. Yeflin's chest slowly began to pump in and out. Her heart had started to beat once again. Jaeger picked Yeflin up and began walking down the road. You may not like what you will become, Jaeger acknowledged, but at least you'll have a chance at revenge. Aviticus and Crazy finally made it to the shore of the Hive Queen's village. It was here that they hoped to find the answers they needed. Aviticus and Crazy approached the village but couldn't see any hivers anywhere. That's strange, Aviticus asserted. Where is everyone? Crazy looked around. I don't see anyone either. Well, let's go talk to the queen, Aviticus said. When Aviticus and Crazy walked into their queen's hut and approached the throne, they could see the bodies of hivers laying across the floor. The Hive Queen's royal soldiers were all slain before them. In the distance, Aviticus could see their queen laying face down, cuts all across her body. She was dead. Who could have done this? Aviticus screamed. Crazy put his hand on the Hive Queen to say his goodbye. All of a sudden, his eyes turned black and a whiteness appeared. Images flashed forward in succession, indicating what had happened. When the whiteness disappeared, Crazy regained his composure. A blue-haired Scorchlander and his crew murdered everyone, Crazy sobbed. That makes no sense. Why would they do that? Aviticus asked. Someone has to be alive. Let's look. Aviticus and Crazy searched the huts, but every hut they entered was populated with more bodies of their own kind. After checking the last hut, Aviticus and Crazy could find no survivors. Everyone in the village was dead. Suddenly, a large group of Hive soldiers led by 2 Hive princes approached them from behind. You're going to pay for this, one of the Hive princes said. Aviticus and Crazy turned around to address the group. We didn't kill anyone. Somebody else did, Aviticus announced. The Hive Prince was angry. That's your story, is it? Such a shame that even in the end, you won't own up to your own evil deeds. Take them, the Hive Prince yelled. Aviticus and Crazy were both stripped down and tied to a post. The group of hivers stood before them, preparing to light them on fire. don't do this, Aviticus yelled. We didn't do anything. A blue-haired Scorchlander and his men killed everyone, Crazy shouted. The Hive Prince doubted them. You'll say anything to save your skin. Burn them, the Hive Prince shouted. Chanting could be heard from the Hivers. Burn them, make them pay, make them pay. Aviticus looked over to Crazy and nodded to him. Crazy repeated the nod back. No words needed to be said. For warriors, a nod was all it took to know that someone respected them. Screams could be heard across the ocean as Aviticus and Crazy were set ablaze. The flames began to eat away at their flesh. The Hivers cheered and placed bets on who would be the last to perish. It was in this moment that memories flashed through Crazy's mind as his life began to fade. Crazy remembered joining Aviticus to help build the Dragon Clan to what it had become. He was happy to have seen the good that they did. He was happy to have made a difference in the world, if ever so slightly. He was happy to die alongside someone he called a friend in his final hour. Darkness had overcome him. Aviticus screamed as the pain was too much to bear. The thought of this blue-haired man getting away with his queen's murder pulsated the blood in his veins. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone framed them. The thought began to drive him mad with rage. The fire no longer had an effect on him, and the flames started to dissipate. Aviticus could feel something changing within him. The Hivers gasped in shock as Aviticus broke free of his chains and stood before them a new man. His body began to emit a flame from within. His veins had turned black. He was something else entirely.